Hey guys, it's Robert White, and this is Coffee with Me. Our guest today is a very unique character. Had 25 years as a counselor in middle school and high school before he launched his very own game company. He's now the creator and the owner of DPH Games. Can't wait to introduce you to him, so stick around. All right, guys, so here we are. It's the owner of DPH Games. Dan Hudzyk is on the couch with me today having coffee. So we're going to introduce Dan and talk about his game company and some of the unique things that he has coming out that are in the works, some of the things that are already out there that people can get a hold of. And then we're just going to talk entrepreneurship with him and learn a little bit about the start of the game company and some of the struggles he's gone through launching everything. So welcome to the couch.
Thanks.
So Dan, I want to just kind of dig into the beginning of DPH Games, the idea part of it all. So how do you go from 25 years as a school counselor to 5 years and 13 months as a game company owner?
Well, I actually was working on a project called STEM, which is science, technology, and science. It was a while ago. Science, technology, engineering, and math, and came into this office, which is a think tank, and was working on that. And the woman in charge of the project ended up getting a fellowship in Malta, and so it didn't look like it was going to go anywhere because we communicate every once in a while, but it was kind of struggling. At the same time, a friend of mine, I introduced to geocaching, and his kids wanted to have a birthday party that was geocaching themed, and I just said, I'll go out and buy a board game about geocaching because there's a game about everything.
Yep.
And there wasn't one, and so got out the card stock and put together a game that we brought to his party. He helped to develop it a little bit at first, and then the people at the party were not geocachers. They were like, this is really cool, you should do something with this. So then he and I started going to some conventions, talking with different gamers, and actually that...
So when you were going to conventions, were you out learning about the board game industry, or were you taking your first game?
We were taking... So what happened is that he went to a convention that happened to be pretty local to him, and he ran into a guy that used to work for a major game company who was like, what do you got? And then started talking to him. And so my friend picks up the phone and says, you have to come up here tomorrow. And so I got up there, and I still talk with Dallas. He was the guy that we ran into. And he just started posing a number of questions that were really good and really changed the nature of that game from a more Monopoly-esque style game to what it is now. Because a lot has happened in gaming since Monopoly in the 30s.
That's Catch Me If You Can.
That's Catch Me If
which
You
was
Can.
the first one that
Yeah.
you ever created.
Yes.
So how does it go from Catch Me If You Can to getting multiple games onto the market?
So when we formed the company, so your previous guest, Jim Sindoma, we formed we incorporated, and we got some shareholders to help finance Catch Me If You Can. And he had asked me the question, do you want to make a game or do you want to have a company? And I said, well, let's do a company. So he's like, well, you need to come up with other ideas, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back and I thought, well, what do I know? And so psychology was the answer to one of those questions. And so I started poking around, and there really isn't, there's a lot of games that use psychology. There's actually games that are sort of therapeutic, but there isn't really a game about psychological theory. And so much to my surprise, when I don't remember now, it's too long ago, where the idea of psychological warfare for a title came up, but I couldn't believe there wasn't a game called that already, even if it was, psychological operations for the military or something. But
right.
like every 2 weeks I'd go back and like this can't be right, and there wasn't. So it's the name certainly helps with the sales of it, but it's a tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic, humorous game that involves psychology. That it's stuff that everyone will be aware of, like defense mechanisms, and it's not like you need a advanced degree to chuckle at the stuff that goes on there. So we kick-started that one in 2014, I believe, and it came out in December of 2014. And then we kept going. I think I wrote down 5 games that I was going to come up with, but I don't know that, I think Psychological Warfare was the only one on that original list, because you adjust and retool and have other ideas.
And you're kind of weaving through and checking Google for other games that are out there that are similar to your ideas and trying not to duplicate or whatever.
Well, you play a lot of games and you want to make sure that you're not copying someone, even inadvertently, because there's a lot of games out there. So you do search, and especially the name. I mean, you want to make sure you're not taking somebody else's name.
So let's go back to the beginning, because you said that you brought in a partner, right? Jim Sindoma, the previous guest.
Mm-hmm.
And then the two of you went out and actually got funding for the company to start. So it wasn't like it's a unique way to start a company, I guess, compared to what other people do. So how does that part build in? How did that work out? To go out and get funding, what's the steps for someone who wants to start a company maybe? And
well, I don't know that I'm the model for that, but I had mentioned it to. I really am not like the salesy type, so I wasn't asking for money, just to let people know that was a possibility they could buy in. And I volunteer over at Care First, which is the local hospice, and the volunteer coordinator at the time says, well, we just sold a house, and I have some money right now, I want to and put that into this. So
cool.
She jumped in. There was another volunteer at the luncheon who was asking me what I was doing, and I just mentioned it, and he came over and wrote a check.
Very cool.
As Jim was starting to gear up for his sales pitch, and the guy's like writing the check, and Jim's like, oh, never mind. So that was kind of funny. The other was, Jim himself, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then a friend of mine who runs about 10 businesses locally, and one of the things that their business does is a lot of promotional items. So she got shares in exchange for promotional items and shipping services and some other things she did.
Very cool.
And then our web designer Greg was some shares in exchange for doing our web page.
Okay. So in the very beginning, you really had a good network of people that kind of jumped on, threw some money at it, and really helped you get off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it was enough to manufacture that first game. For gaming, though, to sustain that, the Kickstarter, if people aren't aware of Kickstarter, it's a social funding. That's not the word. I'm blanking on what it's called.
Yeah, so
crowdsource,
crowdfunding, yeah,
platform. But what's nice about it is you have, a huge following of gamers looking at all the games that are coming out. So the plus side is you have a very targeted audience when you release something there that they can back. The downside is that at any given time there's about 600 games on Kickstarter, so you do need to stand out and do promotion aside from just putting it up there. But at the time, I don't know if that's true for last year, but up until last year, when we hit our most sales the quickest when we were doing the Kickstarter campaigns, because it's built-in everything, built-in target audience, built-in funding, built-in way to purchase easily in a trusted format. So, and you're actually selling close to full retail price, so you're not wholesaling the product out to distributors and wholesalers, which is 50 to 60% discount off of the
Yeah.
product. So it's a way to do direct sales, and it's a way to.
So Kickstarter was a good asset for you.
And still is. Yeah.
Okay. What about, so I'm obviously in the publication industry. I get to see a competitive nature between digital and print. But in the gaming industry, when I think of a gamer, and maybe that's just a terminology that's kind of been put on these guys that are sitting in front of the TV playing video games all the time. What's the industry like between board games and video games? Like, what's the platform like? How does that work?
Well, video games far outsell board games. I mean, the amount of money is pretty massively different. However, board games are growing and have been growing at a very rapid rate over the last 10 years, I'm going to say. And so it's a segment that has been exploding. And there's a lot of crossover. I mean, there's a number of board gamers video game and vice versa. And but part of the interest in this company is to get people to. I mean, I like video games too, but they're very linear in the sense that there's a story and you're playing through it, or if it's a sports thing. I mean, I guess it's not so linear, but it's not as AI isn't there yet, and so sitting around a table interacting with other humans, less predictable than a machine.
Right. So it's a social part of board gaming that really
yeah.
still sells board games.
I think it's a component that
okay,
sells
it's a component. Okay.
There's also board games are not necessarily as linear. They can go in any different directions. And there's a lot of things that you can do in a board game that you can't do in a video game. And it's been a long time that companies have been trying to integrate the two. And I would argue that last year is probably the first year where there were a couple of games that integrated the two things successfully.
So the big question is, someone comes to you and says, hey, we want to turn Psych Warfare or Catch Me If You Can into a video game, and the answer is...
How much is that going to cost me?
Is that a yes or a no? Like, I really don't want to be part of that platform.
Well, as a pragmatic... That platform is also far more competitive than board games. So...
Okay.
At some point, let's just take, like, I have a good hunk of the AI written for psychological warfare to make it into an app.
Okay.
But the benefit of that, the last time I researched, was when you release an app about a board game, it boosts the board game sales by 40%.
Oh, okay.
We're not at a point where there's enough awareness about the card game that we would get that kind of benefit from releasing an app. So we throw that app out on the market, and it's buried into the thousands of other game apps.
I see.
It's more of a challenge to promote that, to have people find that. So if it's Hasbro that's coming to me, then sure.
There's a shout out. Hasbro, hey, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, if they want to do that. Then sure, that would certainly, they would have I'm not opposed. Like I said, I'm not opposed to video games.
Okay.
It's.
But you do like the social part of the board
Sure.
game, the creative part of it, all those pieces that come into play. That's kind of a traditional thing. I don't think that ever goes away when
Right.
it comes to board games. So.
No, and I get to travel a lot to conventions and different game stores, and so I like meeting different people, and I suppose you could be. I mean, I know they have video game tournaments, but it's
right.
It's a different experience. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it's a different experience, and the social aspect of board gaming is a huge piece of it.
Makes sense. Okay, so DPH Games 6 years? Are we saying 5 years
No,
and
I think
13 months?
When I started January of 2013. So
okay, so you're it's pushing 5 years then. You're pushing 5 years. 13?
We're in January. So
we're in January of
2017.
18. So 5 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we're
5 years.
just
Okay.
finished 5 years.
So there's Catch Me If You Can,
Yeah.
Psychological Warfare,
Yeah.
and
So the next one that came out was called Cats: A Sad But Necessary Cycle of Violent Predatory Behavior. And you play cats in the backyard trying to catch, eat, and steal birds.
Okay.
So that's like a 20-minute, half-hour game. It's a little lighter. After that, the next one that came out, and actually the last one that's come out, was called Affliction Salem 1692, and that's a historically accurate game about the Salem witch trials. And so the people in the game were actually people in the Salem region. So that game has done pretty well. It's got some national attention, some national reviews. Was told last week by the Salem Witch Museum that's the best-selling item they've ever had at that price point.
Oh, very cool.
So, that one's been doing pretty well.
Okay. So we'll kind of wrap things up a little bit with you. I'm going to put links in the description for this video so you guys can go see all the games, get copies of everything, learn more. We'll put the website on there for DPH Games, maybe a little more bio information about Dan and what's kind of coming out, but give us like a little sneak peek of like what's 2018's big game going to be? What's in development right now?
So the Gate of Relay is a deduction game.
Okay.
So we're all trying to achieve a goal, but there's traitors among us, and there's a number of games like that, but this one's very different in that the traitors don't know each other, and the clock, they're actually racing against the clock, and that's the big enemy. That one, there's a larger company interested in purchasing.
Oh, okay.
So we'll know about that in a month.
So not a Hasbro shout out for that idea.
Not Hasbro.
Okay.
That's
Mattel.
Not Mattel. It's a different company. You wouldn't know their name, but they are very successful in board game.
Okay.
So if they pick that up, then I don't know how long it'll take, and I get an email once every couple weeks saying, when is this game coming out? Because we've been promoting it for almost a year.
Okay.
If they pick that up, then we'll immediately go to the next game that we're developing called Legacy at Sea, which is a historical fiction piracy game about the golden age of piracy.
Which I personally have test played with you.
Yes, you did.
And it was fun as hell. And I think at the end of this video, we're going to try to get a little, shot of that, like a little secret shot of the test play that's going on, actually in like an hour or two after we film this. So that should be pretty interesting to see. But we'll give them a little sneak peek of that game. I'm a big fan of that one so far, probably only because it's the only one I've played.
Yeah, when you play the other ones, you might be fans of those too. They're all different. I mean, I don't like to do the same style. We also have more of a puzzle-y game called Yokai Hunters that's in development, and probably 3 years out, we're working with a local author who's published a number of books, and as the gears turn, as one of his books that we're working on a project to develop off of that. And then we're also co-producing a game that I have to peek because I'll get it wrong, and it's the Maze of Minos. And so that one might be on Kickstarter in a few months.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out and giving me more information about the company. Hopefully the people out there that are seeing this video will go check out DPH Games and buy some copies. There's some really cool stuff there. I think you've got majority of people's interests covered with what's on the market now, but there definitely is new stuff coming. So it's worth going to follow him. Facebook, Instagram, social media stuff, what's all that under? DPH Games for everything?
DPH Games, DPHgames.com, Facebook's DPH Games, Twitter.
Okay.
We're not very creative. It's just DPH Games.
Perfect.
If you search DPH Games on Google, we're the first, 8 pages of Google. So.
All right, awesome. I'll make sure I put it all in the description, guys. But thanks for coming to another episode of Coffee with me and Dan and DPH Games.